It was supposed to be an ordinary business trip, another flight on a busy schedule for a man used to boardrooms and skyscrapers. But inside that airport, a storm of prejudice was waiting. A black CEO, dressed in a tailored suit, presented his ticket, first class, booked weeks in advance. Yet the flight attendant's cold eyes told him otherwise. She insisted he step aside, claiming there must have been a mistake. Around him, whispers began. Stares cut into his pride. He wasn't just being denied a seat, he was being denied his dignity. But little did anyone know, in just 12 minutes, he would bring the entire plane to a standstill. Watch until the end. Wait a second, tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Daniel Carter was no ordinary passenger. He was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in America, a man whose vision had brought innovation to industries once thought untouchable. Despite his success, Daniel had learned that money and status didn't shield him from the ugly reality of racism. He lived in a world where the color of his skin often overshadowed his brilliance. That morning, he arrived at the airport calm. He focused, reviewing documents for a multi-million-dollar partnership he was about to finalize. His assistant had secured a first-class ticket, ensuring a comfortable journey for the long trip. Daniel wasn't traveling for luxury. He was traveling for opportunity. As he approached the gate, he noticed the subtle stares, the quiet judgments. He brushed them off as he always did. But once he handed over his ticket, things shifted. The attendant's smirk, the dismissive tone, the insistence that this seat isn't for you, it all hinted at what was coming. And Daniel felt a familiar fire ignite inside him. The boarding area was crowded, buzzing with the usual chatter of travelers eager to settle into their seats. Yet Daniel stood frozen, his ticket clutched tightly as the attendant repeated her claim. "This must be economy," she muttered, loud enough for others to hear. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, some smirking, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Daniel calmly explained it was indeed a first-class booking. Still, the attendant's voice grew sharper, accusing him of holding up the line. Another worker came over, scanned the ticket, exchanged a glance with his colleague, and then whispered, maybe he swapped with someone. The implication was clear. He didn't belong there. As minutes passed, the humiliation thickened. A white passenger behind him impatiently huffed, saying, "Can we hurry this up?" The attendant smiled politely at him while continuing to block Daniel's entry. The injustice was undeniable. Others walked past him freely, but he was singled out, treated as if he were trespassing. Daniel's mind raced. This wasn't the first time he had been judged, doubted, or demeaned, but this time was different. This wasn't just a slight, it was an attack on his identity, his worth, and his presence. He thought of the younger generation watching men like him, of the countless untold stories of humiliation swept under silence. And so, he made a choice. He would not walk away quietly. He slipped his phone from his pocket, his fingers moving with precision. Within seconds, he was connected, not to a lawyer, not to a friend, but to a contact whose influence stretched across the skies. The call he placed would shake the entire plane. The aircraft had just begun boarding when the ripple effect of Daniel's call hit. A supervisor rushed to the gate, eyes wide with urgency, whispering frantically into the attendant's ear. Then, almost as if on cue, the boarding process came to a halt. Passengers looked around in confusion as an announcement echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated in the lounge. Boarding has been temporarily suspended." The attendants who mocked Daniel moments earlier now stood pale, their confidence stripped away. Behind the scenes, Daniel's influence had reached the airline's headquarters. The CEO of the very company whose staff had humiliated him was on the line, demanding answers. Within minutes, word came down. No flight would depart until Daniel Carter was properly accommodated and an explanation was delivered. In that tense silence, Daniel didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat. He stood tall, his presence enough to remind everyone watching that dignity is not something to be negotiated. Eventually, the situation unraveled in full view of every passenger. The attendants were forced to apologize. Trembling voices had replaced their arrogance. Daniel was escorted to his rightful seat in first class, but the atmosphere of the plane had shifted. Passengers whispered about what had just unfolded, some ashamed, others awakened. For Daniel, this wasn't about comfort or ego. It was about the principle, the reality that no matter how successful, educated, or accomplished a black man might be, prejudice could still try to cage him. But on that day, prejudice failed. The story spread beyond the plane, sparking conversations across media outlets. People debated what it meant when a man of power had to fight for respect that should have been automatic. The deeper question lingered. If this could happen to a CEO, what happens daily to those without his influence, whose voices aren't heard? Daniel knew the battle wasn't over. But as the plane soared into the sky, one truth remained unshaken. Racism can try to deny your seat, but it cannot ground your worth. Tell us in the comments, which country and city are you watching from? Take care.